All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to get straight into the Q&A session, talking about voter registration. I'd like to welcome on the stage our very special guest, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu. Please put your hands together for him as he joins me on the stage. So I know a lot of people here are probably here for this particular segment. I'll probably just ask one or two questions before I throw it out so that I give them an opportunity to go on with that. And very specifically to something Aram just mentioned, and I think when I put out this on Twitter about this event, I think the overwhelming number of comments I got was about the transition from online to actually doing, the biometrics, capturing and all of that, and how so many local governments outside of the cities especially seem to have very inadequate, machines. Someone particularly sent me a message saying their local government had one machine or something like that, and it takes endless days. Parts of the Southeast even complain about the fact that INEC officials had to be paid for you to be able to jump the queue and get registered. So it makes the entire process very cumbersome. So while we acknowledge and applaud the online segments of things, it looks like it doesn't translate still to the physical. Why is that, and how do we get around that?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start from the first question or comment on the online pre-registration that the Commission suspended. Is it that you want the online pre-registration to be restored? Yes. But which component? There are three components. For the online pre-registration, there is pre-registration of voters, that they then go and complete the registration physically at designated centers. But there is also the second component for replacement of lost or damaged cards. That one is open, we haven't closed that. And then there is the component of correction of personal details, we haven't suspended that. And then transfer and relocation, we have not suspended that. The only one of the four components suspended is the actual pre-registration. And we did it for a reason. Those who pre-register online must go to the centers to complete the registration physically, rather like visa application. Now, if we allow the two processes to continue simultaneously, it means online pre-registrants will keep booking for an appointment until the last day of the physical registration, in which case there will be no opportunity for them to complete the registration. Particularly Nigerians who have been applying from outside the country, they have to come to the country to complete the registration. Between June and December, when we commence the online pre-registration in the first 2 quarters, 1.6 million Nigerians from outside the country actually applied online but are unable to complete the registration physically. So if you look at the statistics, the weekly statistics that we release, you will see a large number commencing the pre-registration online, but the figure compared to the number of completed registration physically is actually always very high. So we suspended it for that reason, so that those who have already applied for the pre-registration online can now book for an appointment to complete the registration. But if we allow the two to continue simultaneously, it means that some of them may not have the opportunity to actually complete the registration physically. And that's the reason, but it's only one component of the online pre-registration. I must say this, that after the 2019 general election, we had an engagement with citizens, all stakeholders, in different parts of the country. Eventually, we had a big retreat in Lagos. And citizens made over 170 recommendations to the Commission. We have the report. And the recommendations are in 3 parts. Those that require administrative action by INEC, or recommendations that require amendment to the existing laws, that's the Electoral Act, or those that require alteration of the Constitution. But for those that require just administrative action by the Commission, we have implemented them completely, including the online pre-registration. It is young Nigerians who actually suggested to the Commission. In fact, one of them was so agitated, he sent a letter to say that they are going to organize a demonstration in front of the Commission if we did not start the online registration. So there was a contact on the letter. I invited them to the office. I said, no need to organize a demonstration. You are preaching to the converted. Come, let's share ideas. How exactly do you want this online pre-registration to proceed? Fortunately, what they proposed is consistent with what we were thinking about. And this is what led to the online pre-registration, learning from the experience of the queues that happened in 2017 and 2018. So this is the reason why we suspended the online pre-registration, but the 4 components remain. The second question is inadequate machines, especially in the southeast. Yes, I had complaints, particularly from Anambra, and I've been on the phone with our resident electoral commissioner for Anambra State since yesterday. Particularly when some of the images surfaced online, saying that, oh, they visited our office, particularly in Nnewi North. The office was under lock and key. The office was attacked. We shut down the office. And the same thing with our office in, in Idemili North that we shut down, and the video was from Idemili North. But we also closed down our office in Nnewi South. We closed the office in Ogbaru and then Ayamelum. So these 4 local governments were not doing the registration. But after discussion with the REC, we agreed that we are going to send more machines to the states. And it's not only the southeast or Anambra in particular. There are also queues building up in Lagos. We also saw queues building up in the FCT, particularly Gariki, and in the urban local government areas in Kano. So we'll send additional machines. And therefore, once we have the additional machines, we'll be able to respond to the queues. I want to thank all of you for the efforts you have made to get Nigerians out to register. My only wish was that we started this much earlier than now, because we started the registration 11 months ago. But probably when we started, they did not pay attention to all your advocacy, typical of the way we do things. So we'll wait until the last week of the exercise, then we troop out. And then at that point, we'll talk about being disenfranchised. But our responsibility is to respond to what citizens want. You require more machines so that we clear the queues, more machines will be provided. And then we'll watch and see what happens. I have been registering as a voter. I'm not such a young person now. I've been registering as a voter and involved in election administration for the last 37 years. The first time I registered was in 1983. And since 1983, with every registration, whether it is a fresh registration or continuous registration, there has always been that clamor for extension towards the end. The Commission will always listen to what Nigerians want, will always facilitate it to make sure that as many Nigerians as possible register and collect the PVCs, not just registering, register and collect the PVCs to be able to vote. So we're watching the trend, but be rest assured, we'll be very positive when the time comes. I'm not Mr. INEC, so I'm not saying that the Commissioner has decided to extend, but the INEC has demonstrated that we are very positive always. What Nigerians want is what we provide. I think that's a cause for cheer, without saying much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just a follow-up question to that, because a lot of people wonder, while we understand that the voter registration has to end at some point, because as the law says, you have to end 90 days before any election, why does it not continue right after? You said it was opened 11 months ago. If it's called a continuous voter registration, why is it not constantly open, regardless of whether election is coming up or not? Maybe you should just explain that to us.
Okay, this is actually the easiest thing to explain. You know, before 2010, with every election in Nigeria, voters were required to register afresh. In 2010, the Commission introduced the biometric register of voters. So we are only updating. Those that are registered need not register because it's an offense to register more than once. So the question is, the law says that there shall be continuous registration of voters. Why did we start 11 months ago? And why are we suspending the registration in June instead of 90 days to the election as provided by law? We couldn't have started the registration much earlier. Much as we wanted to start the registration immediately after the 2019 general elections. Remember the big issue in 2020, COVID. Once COVID set in, much of the world, probably the entire world, was actually shut down. So there was no way you could have conducted voter registration under the circumstances. Even election became difficult for us to conduct. Later, of course, many nations and health authorities came up with the protocols for conducting activities involving a large number of people. Remember, in the year 2020, probably the number of people in this hall would have been half of it because of the COVID protocol. We couldn't have registered voters. But the positive side of the COVID lockdown is the online pre-registration. So it reduced the number of people that gathered in a location, and then it also facilitated the registration. That is the positive side of COVID. So we couldn't have started it much as we wanted much earlier. But even when we decided to start, and we doubled the number of centers, between 2017 and 2018, we registered citizens in 1,446 centers nationwide. We said we expected a surge for the new registration. Therefore, we increased the number of centers to 2,673. But we couldn't deploy for security reasons. So what did the commission do? We called a meeting of all the stakeholders, the media, civil society, political parties, and the security agencies, that this is our particular predicament. What do we do? The civil society, political parties, media, and the security agencies told us to be careful about security. We should start online, devolve fiscal registration to identified centers in our 774 local government areas, watch the situation before we devolved to the other centers, including the rotational centers. So it was purely after consultation with all the stakeholders, including civil society. So we couldn't have started this earlier, but we have started. That's the good thing. We are now doing the registration both fiscally, and we have just suspended the online registration after 1 year, and it continues online physically. Now, the question is, the law says, and I've read comments about that, the law says we should stop the registration 90 days to the election. That is exactly what the law does not say. That is exactly what the law does not say. Now, that's why in my opening remarks I said we should be reading the provisions of the law actually very carefully. I know that there are several sections of the Electoral Act that talk about online the registration of voters. The law says that INEC shall stop voter registration not later than 90 days before the date fixed for the election. Not later than 90 days. Therefore, nothing stopped the commission from stopping the registration earlier. Where the law doesn't want INEC to stop until 90 days, the law would have said, don't stop earlier than 190 days. Like the law says, don't conduct elections earlier than 150 days to the handing over. And if there is any specific date that the law wants us to stop, the law would have said so. Like end of campaign by political parties, stop 24 hours before the date fixed for the election. But look at the other activities that we need to undertake from the time the registration is suspended to election date. Section 19, I think Section 19, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act talks about publication of the register of voters nationwide, not later than 90 days before the date fixed for the election. So if you take the 90 days provided for under Section 9(6) of the Electoral Act, what about under Section 10(1), what about Section 19(1) of the Electoral Act? It said that we have to stop the registration and we have to paste the list in all local governments and all wards of the Federation. What does that take? It's a huge work. If you look at the register of voters at the polling units, the register has 10 names on it. So our projection is that if we have 90 million registered voters, and each page has 10 names, and the law requires that we should paste the register in all local governments and all wards nationwide for claims and objections by citizens. It means that we have to print those registers physically. So 90 million divided by 10, it will give you 9 million. So the commission will print 9 million pages of the register to paste for claims and objections by citizens. And we do it as a commission. That's why we have giant printers in all INEC offices nationwide. And that is part of the reason why we have a spike in the election budget. It's a requirement of the law. We have to do it so that citizens can help us to clean up the register of voters. When that is done, then we have to consolidate the register, new registrants and the old registrants, and produce the register of voters for the next election, 2023. And we print 3 copies of the register, 1 in color at the polling units on election day, 2 for display, including 1 at the polling units. So 9 million times 3 is 27 million pages that INEC has to print for the elections. In addition to that, we have to do the deduplication so that we remove the ineligible registrants from the register, and then print the PVCs and make the PVCs available for collection. If we stop 90 days to the election, vital time will be eaten by these preparations, such that the PVCs will probably be ready 1 or 2 weeks to the election. And then you will have an even bigger crowd in our offices saying that they have not collected their PVCs. And if they don't collect the PVCs, they can't vote. So of what use is the mobilization for citizens to register when at the end of it all, they won't collect their PVCs before the election? So that's why we decided to stop much earlier than the 90 days to enable us to do all these legal processes required by law and to make the cards available so that long before the election, citizens will have their PVCs to enable them vote on election day. I hope I've responded to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We'll quickly move on to security as well as political parties and see how many we can quickly get through. On security and logistics, I have 2 very, very quick questions I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman. First of all is on security itself, and we all saw what happened in Anambra State, and we've complained endlessly about apathy in Nigeria, but I think what we saw in Anambra was shocking with the number of votes cast eventually on the day, and a lot of it was a result of people not being confident enough to come out and vote because we know what's happening at the time. I mean, that's the last election fresh in people's minds. So I guess the question here is, what's the plan for Anambra, for places like Imo, for polling units on the Kaduna-Abuja Express? You know, all of these places in the northeast where we know things are very, very scary, for want of a better word. Are elections going to hold in these places? If elections are going to hold, what is the commission doing, particularly to make sure that voters are able to come out and cast their votes? Second question on logistics, and this kind of touches on credibility for the INEC, because a lot of people are worried now, wondering, is the CBN governor now a politician? And we know that the vault holds a lot of what the INEC uses on election day. Are there plans to move these things from there? And if not, how do you get people to believe that the CBN is not compromised in this? Thank you.
Okay, should I respond? Okay, let me start with what I consider the easiest part, the movement of election materials. But logistics, when you talk about logistics in elections, is much wider than just the movement of sensitive materials for the election. Take the case of Ekiti, for instance. All non-sensitive materials have been delivered to Ado Ekiti, and they're in all the local government areas in the state. We have no issues with those. But we are talking about the specific case of materials usually delivered on behalf of the Commission by the Central Bank of Nigeria, inspected on the premises of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and then moved out of the premises of the CBN by our own officials. I want to say that since INEC started this collaboration with the central bank, we have never experienced a single issue with the movement of materials from the CBN. Never, not one. The agency responsible for our national currency, both printing and custody, has been such a good partner to the Commission. But we appreciate the current circumstances, and it is for that reason, pending the time we find an alternative, that for Ekiti State, the materials will not be routed through the Central Bank of Nigeria. Where we'll move the materials to the airport in Akure and move the materials to our office in Ado Ekiti and do the distribution in our office in Ado Ekiti. So we're not going to use the central bank in the meantime. But when it comes to subsequent elections, particularly general, then we have to look for alternative way of doing it. But I want to assure you that for Ekiti, the Ekiti governorship elections, the materials will not be handled by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Okay. Security, will election hold in areas of insecurity? Our plan is that election will hold in all parts of the country. And you know, we have been meeting with the security agencies. In our last but one meeting with the security agencies, I said so. At that time, we had 9 months to the general election. And I said that we should think about the best arrangement to ensure that voting takes place in all parts of the country long before the election. Let us not wait until a few weeks or so to the election that we begin to think about shifting what alternative arrangements there are. But sometimes security matters are not discussed in public because some of the bad guys are also listening to this conversation. So I'm a bit circumspect in discussing security issues in this manner. But I'm very happy with our collaboration with the security agencies. The second dimension to insecurity is not instances where elections don't hold at all, but instances where election may not hold at designated venues. Remember, the Commission introduced the idea of voting by internally displaced persons, where you recreate the polling units in IDP camps. And the Commission last week approved the review of the framework and policy for IDP voting, because it appears that now the problem is more widespread than was the case in 2015 and 2019, where it was confined more or less to a particular geopolitical zone of this country. So in terms of security arrangements, elections must hold in all parts of the country. Where there are reasons to hold the elections in the IDP camps where there is a concentration, there is already a policy to deal with that situation. So we're not even contemplating a situation where elections will hold in some parts of the country and wouldn't hold in other parts of the country. And we have so far received assurances by the security agencies that elections will hold in all parts of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll take one more question on the political parties segment so that we can just take everything all together, both security and political parties. Talking of political parties with regards to elections, I know a lot of the questions are going to be about moving the dates of the deadline. But I want to ask about the youth party and why that seems to be quite a controversial position taken by INEC, you know, with deregistering the youth party in spite of court rulings to the contrary. Explain what is going on there and why the Independent National Electoral Commission still believes that a youth party should not be a registered political party.
Okay, it's a very easy question to answer, but I'll not go into detail for the reason that I'm going to explain. INEC did not isolate the YP for deregistration. The fourth alteration to the Constitution provides the criteria for deregistration of political parties. And we deregistered 74 political parties after the 2019 general elections. And I think one of the parties they registered is the YP, the Youth Party. Now, they took the commission to court, one at the High Court, one at the Court of Appeal. The commission has exercised its constitutional right to also appeal to the Supreme Court where the matter is. The matter came up at the Supreme Court on Monday this week, and it has been adjourned to, I think, either the 27th or the 29th of September for definite hearing. Once a matter is before the courts, you don't comment on these matters. But there is no way the commission can take delight in just deregistering a political party for the sake of deregistering the political party. 74 political parties were affected. One of them actually dragged the commission all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. 22 others also dragged the commission all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. I don't know about the case of the Youth Party. Whichever it goes, it enriches our electoral jurisprudence, because at the heart of the matter is the constitutional powers of the commission. And if the Supreme Court tomorrow says deregister the Youth Party, I will happily call them and hand over the certificate of registration to the Youth Party. So there's nothing between the commission and any other organization. What is the issue is that the commission has appealed the judgments of the lower courts to the apex court. And it's a constitutional process, it's legitimate. When the Supreme Court makes a pronouncement, it's binding on all persons and authorities in the Federation of Nigeria. I don't know if there is any order of the Supreme Court that the commission has not obeyed. Not in the case of the YP, not in the case of any political party. So please, the matter is before the courts, is sub judice, as they say. We leave it as such. But whatever the Supreme Court says, we obey. There are also instances where the Electoral Commission took similar cases, not necessarily about registration, but involving political parties, all the way to the Supreme Court. You remember the famous Labour Party versus INEC case, 2009, where if an election is nullified on account of candidate disqualification, parties argued, particularly the Labour Party at that time, that the party should be allowed to substitute its candidate and participate in the court-order rerun election. The commission said no. The disqualification of your candidate led to the nullification of the election. There must be penalty and consequences. The matter went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the commission. And since then, if an election is nullified on account of candidate disqualification, meaning that the candidate did not meet the requirements for participating in the election in the first instance, then the candidate, disqualified candidate, and the party cannot field a candidate for the court-ordered rerun elections. This has been the experience of other nations as well. I can't remember how many times the ANC in South Africa dragged the Electoral Commission to court, almost always in court with political parties, but nothing personal. It's an institutional thing. Once the court rules, what is the business of the commission? After all, the commission registers the political parties. So as far as this matter is concerned, I wouldn't say much. But the commission has exercised its constitutional right to appeal to the Supreme Court. The matter is there. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of any political party or any candidate or on any issue against the commission, will gladly obey court orders. I hope I've answered the YP case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're going to take 3 questions strictly related to security and logistics, as well as political parties as they relate to the INEC. Please, people who have asked questions before, let's leave them out. Let's get someone from the back at least as well. And please keep your questions short because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ajibola Hamzat. I work for the International Center for Investigative Reporting here in Abuja. My question for you, sir, is the same question I asked you about 4 years ago when you were also at the Sheraton Hotel talking about the election. And the question I asked then was about the ad hoc staff of the INEC. Several times we've reported about the kind of distress that the ad hoc staff face on election day. They don't get paid on time. They don't get to be moved around easily and all that.
Okay.
And that's repeated itself several times. So I want to know, What system have you put in place this time around to address that very, very...
Thank you.
Thank you.
With due respect, Gumu Joseph Augustine is my name. Thank you for your time, the INEC chairman. And I thank our commissioner for the supportive nature. My question is on election security. You know, the election security angle is a three-dimension. The pre-election, which INEC, in collaboration with the interagency security, they are doing very well in terms of the primary election. The mobilization is okay, commendable. The election day proper election is my concern, and the post-election, which is our major concern. The mobilization and briefing for the election day proper, I don't have problem with that.
So what's the problem?
My problem is the post-election, the debriefing. After election, people are not concerned about the sensitive material any longer. And these are part of the evidence they tender in court to turn for an election. What happens to the debriefing?
Okay.
As regards to the sensitive materials, in escorting those sensitive material back, or say custody of those sensitive material, the post-election security management in terms of some of the sensitive material, what happens to that?
Thank you.
And in debriefing, you know, it's a key element in election, in security information, because security is ruled by information.
Okay.
So that is that.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Right Honorable Ricky Nwajofo, the Speaker Ndibo Youth Parliament. My question is on logistics. During the last elections, I had the opportunity of joining the observer groups. Mr. Chairman, I found out that the observers in the last elections that I observed too were not doing their works. Much as the voters were being bought, most of the observers too were out there hankering for money. I don't think they ever did their jobs of giving good reports. We have some in the video which we may tender to the commission if needed. So my question is, the commission, I learned the commission does not fund observer groups any longer. And I would ask, don't you think that it puts them on that verge of looking out for who gives them the logistics to go home or come for the election? Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Sadiq Omolaye. I write for the Guardian newspaper. Earlier, while you were speaking, you said the commission, for the Ekiti governorship election, you said the commission will not keep its sensitive material in the CBN that is going to move directly from the airport to your state offices. I want to ask, is this decision related to the open partisanship displayed by the CBN governor?
Thank you.
Godwin Emefiele.
Sorry, sir. This is a very important question. It has to do with, should I say, I don't know, sir, if you would consider implementing some form of citizen arrest on INEC staff during elections. I'm saying this because I've been a first-hand victim in 2009 during the Ondo State elections that saw Dr. Olusegun Mimiko win in court. I was one of those youth corpers. In fact, I was in charge of mobilizing the youth corpers then in Ondo State during that elections where we had INEC officials like kind of literally twist the arms of corpers and say, you know what, we are INEC staff and you are here to work under us. And whatever we tell you to do, you do. But of course, I wasn't one of such people. And I introduced something to our youth corpers then. We had 2 signatures, right? We had the one we had submitted to INEC as our official signatures. And I told the corpers, you should also have another signature. So that if in case we have to go to court, we'll say that this particular signature was, we had to do this one under duress. So what I'm trying to say is this, sir. If in a situation, an INEC official who you have sent there, or the country has sent there to do their job in should I say, conducting proper, free and fair elections, go out of their way. I'm not saying jungle justice, but at least would INEC give the citizenry an opportunity to implement what most Nigerians are not aware, that there's something called citizen arrest, arrest this particular official and then hand that person to the police and of course record them. So please, I think that should be considered. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Victor Matthias. I'm the Executive Director of Satyagraha Institute for Peace Building and Conflict Resolution. So my question is on the issue of logistics. I was once an electoral officer somewhere in Zaria, and you find out that on election day, you are taken to the local government, and then from there you're expected to distribute yourself to your polling units. But in most cases, there is no provision for your transportation onward. So I don't know. At the end of the day, the political party starts wanting to foot your transportation, and then that is where the inducement starts from.
Okay.
So please, I think that should be looked into, because political parties take advantage of that situation, and then they were the one that transported you, and then they start cutting for your favors. Thank you.
I think a lot of these questions are interrelated. So if you hear a question that sounds like something you want to ask, please, so that we can save some time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Election day violence is a major cause of voter apathy. And I'll just list 2 cases and I would like to know what the position of INEC is on those cases. Number 1 was the election day violence recorded along Agor Palace Way during the 2019 election. And then number 2 was the Kogi Guba election, the helicopter hovering and spraying bullets. So what's the position of INEC, and how can INEC ensure that this is mitigated in forthcoming elections? Thank you.
Please, we can't take any more.
My name is Johanna Samuel Bamei. I work for Rural Youth Initiative coming from Kebbi State. I firstly want to commend an experience we had with INEC. My organization is also a member of the Civil Society Situation Room. And Mr. Chairman, so I remember in 2019, we observed the election. And the interesting part of it is that Civil Society Situation Room has observers in almost all the polling units, especially in Kebbi where I work. And we have a situation room that we call to report issues as it happens, called right from the polling unit. And in turn, the situation room connects with the contacts in INEC, and we get instant response. So I want to commend INEC for that, and I also want to urge that we maintain that collaboration with the Civil Society Situation, and as much as you can with other CSOs that are willing to report issues as they happen, and we solve them as we vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll take the last question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mbo Eno, and I work with the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development. We are aware that the 2022 Electoral Act has increased the value that can be spent by political parties for electioneering. But before now, I'm not too sure if INEC has been releasing reports on political parties' campaign financing. It's very important that Nigerians know how the funds of political parties are gotten and how they are spent. Can the electoral body help in also sanctioning political parties that err? Thank you.
That's such a brilliant question. Very, very important.
Sorry, just from some of us, there is one question on the paper. Can INEC, through interagency and legislative processes, champion the harmonization of PVC, NIN, BVN?
Okay. Huh? Okay, I'll just ask the question.
So now this also, Mr. Chairman, people are worried. Would there be same standard guidelines on issue of electronic transmission of results and biometrics? What they are saying is that if people are experiencing problems in any part, any area of the country, will there be that it has to be biometrics and nothing will be done? And finally, is there anything like the age of technology? There is this concern that those who recently registered are easily accredited through BVAS than those who probably have done their registration maybe 4-5 years ago. And finally, it's important that we say this, age of technology. For instance, in Anambra, there was this allegation that people who were recently registered, who got their PVC during the windows created by INEC, that the beavers easily validated their thumbprints and facials more than those who have been with the PVC for 5, 7 or more years. And finally, on the issue of vote buying, will INEC consider the strategic location of the cubicle and the ballot box in a way that vote buyers are unable to monitor the voters?
Thank you. It's a lot of questions.
Okay. Should I respond? Okay. Quite a number of questions and issues raised. Okay, distress faced by ad hoc staff. That is from ICIR. I recall our discussion 4 years ago. And as a result of that discussion, we went back to the drawing board. And since 2019, have you had complaints again about the payment of ad hoc staff? Because we introduced letters of appointments to all categories of ad hoc staff. That letter of appointment will convey their entitlements, the mode of payment. They will complete their bank details themselves on the letter, and then there is a procedure for complaint. And we have a dedicated WhatsApp line that they can just fill the form for complaints and send to the commission directly. Since then, all the elections we have conducted, we haven't had complaints about payment for ad hoc staff, including the last one we conducted in the FCT and even in the Anambra election. So if there are complaints, please, it's not known to me as such, but I'm sure it should have been public knowledge where there are complaints of non-payment of ad hoc staff that participate in the election. Now, in the case of Anambra, I know that at a point some ad hoc staff were not paid, but it was related to reverse logistics issue. Remember, they handled the beavers. The beavers went with small components, particularly the power banks. Some of them did not return the power banks. So the REC withheld their payment until that was done in collaboration with the NYSC office in that state. But since then, we have paid, as far as the official records are concerned, all those who participated as ad hoc staff during elections. But as part of your investigation, if there are people that have not been paid, kindly send me the information. But the fact that you don't hear, we haven't had any complaints in the public space, means that the situation now is remarkably different from the situation before the 2019 elections. But we'll continue to improve. But as a matter of policy, all those who are involved in election duty, whether they are ad hoc NYSC or ad hoc other categories like the supervisory presiding officers and what have you, we have a system of documentation that pays them directly. For some of them that were not paid in earlier elections, we discovered that some of them may not have bank accounts or may have misunderstood the instruction on non-payment. And therefore, they'll collect their uncle's bank account, but it's their name. So when we process the payment, the banks will return the payment because of inconsistency between name and account details. Because they assume that it's like their uncle somebody sending money to them, they can use their uncle's account. But since then, we have, I think, largely tackled this problem. I haven't heard of any complaints, but the commission will be very happy to hear if you are hearing something else. But I remember the conversation we had 4 years ago, and we took it seriously. There are other components of the welfare of the core members that have been taken care of, like how the fare at the super racks, where they stay the night before they deploy to the polling units on election day. Again, this is related to a very critical problem. Election is supposed to ride on the back of the national infrastructure. INEC doesn't have its own railways or its own roads or its own buildings. We use public buildings once every 4 years or as the need arises. But when we deploy to the super racks, for instance, where the core members and other ad hoc staff stay the night, We provide electricity, and that's why we buy electricity generators for all the local government areas and all the wards in the country. So we generate our own electricity during elections. And then in the morning, they have to wash their faces. They have to take a bath. We also provide water. So during elections, actually, you see large GP tanks with rubber buckets and cups and toiletries that the commission provides. So on the eve of elections, we also serve as a mini water board. We provide our own water. So we have been doing that. But you see, the super RACs are in schools, mainly owned by state governments. And these schools are supposed to have all these facilities. In fact, at a point in 2019, we had to liaise with the NYSC to move the mattresses that they use in the NYSC orientation camps to some of the locations, just to make the corpus more comfortable. We don't take that for granted, because the core members are the most reliable election duty staff, the most educated, the most patriotic, will never take their welfare lightly. So thank you for raising that again, but please let's continue with the conversation until we make it perfect. But you can see the progress we have made since our last conversation 4 years ago. Guma Joseph, management of election and post-election. You talk about reverse logistics, particularly of sensitive materials. I'm unsure that this is necessarily a security matter. Because at the end of it all, we bring back the sensitive materials, basically in this case, the used ballot papers and the result sheets. And one of the first things that people ask for is the CTC of these documents to prosecute petitions in the election petition tribunals. And we have always made available these CTCs. But we have gone a notch higher now. Immediately election is concluded at polling units, we transmit results to the IRF portal. So even if you stop our officials and snatch the results that they have, it means nothing. Agents have their copies, the police will have a copy, and it's already on the IRF portal. I hope I've understood the question that you're asking for, because you talked about security in relation to the sensitive materials. We do reverse logistics for more than just the sensitive materials. All the other materials that we delivered for the elections will have to be recovered from the field. So I'm not sure that we had any problem, unless I did not understand the question correctly in relation to the sensitive materials. Right, Honorable, you talked about logistics, that observers are not funded, and therefore they pander to interests because they are not funded. We choose the observer groups properly. But as a matter of policy, we don't fund the observer groups because they are supposed to observe elections and report to us so that we now hear from them things that we may not otherwise hear from any other source. But once we fund them, they become part and parcel of us. They will probably tell us what we want to hear rather than the reality. But we always want to hear the reality so that we'll keep improving on this system. Yes, where we do well, commend us. We are happy when we are commended. Where we don't, criticize us and also provide solutions. You will see these solutions implemented. That's why we have consistently seen the incremental improvement on our electoral processes. But I have taken note of what you have said. We are going to be even more diligent now in accrediting observers. Remember now they also apply online. There's a portal for accreditation of observers, just as we accredit the media. There's a question from gentleman in The Guardian saying that is our decision to experiment with something else as a result of what is happening in the central bank. No, we are always experimenting better ways by which you can secure the processes. So not necessarily related to what is happening in the central bank. Our intention is always to keep improving and also take complete ownership of the process. Our preference is to take complete ownership of the process. I think you are looking for a catchy headline tomorrow. Very catchy headline. Because of the central bank, INEC chairman says we are always improving on the processes. Without prejudice to what I have said, And I hope there will be no catchy headline tomorrow, Sunday, because there are people here who bear witness that I didn't say so. But you said something about citizens' arrest. The law permits that if you can invoke citizens' arrest, you don't need the permission of INEC to obey the law. So, but the best thing will be to draw the attention of the security agencies to do their job, so that you don't create a totally unexpected or different situation. Then there's a gentleman who said that he was an electoral officer in one of the local government areas in one of the states, and there were issues moving our staff. Is it to the racks on Friday from the local governments, or from the racks in the morning to the polling units? The one on Saturday to the polling units. Okay, how long ago were you an EO? 2007. You said 2007 and 2011. That must have been a long time ago. Remember now, some of the super racks and the racks are also polling units. So in the morning, you don't even need transport to set up the polling units. When they wake up in the morning on Saturday, they just set up and people start coming for accreditation and voting. But we have vastly improved these processes. Now the commission is solely responsible for the movement of officials, not only from the state to the local governments with the sensitive materials, but also from the local governments to the racks and the super racks on Friday, and then to the polling units at first light. What we have been trying to do is to cluster the polling units around racks so that there isn't considerable distance to cover, which will obviate the need for any elaborate means of transportation. Where they stay the night, there are camps where the ad hoc staff stay the night before they deploy to the polling units on election day in the morning. So they are not covered by a considerable distance as to warrant transportation by undesirable people on election day. Election violence. You talked about, gentleman talked about election violence as witnessed in particularly Kogi State. My response to that is Ekiti East State Constituency 1, learning from the experience of what happened in Kogi and other places. When it happened, we suspended the election. In fact, we are going to rerun the by-election alongside the governorship election in the next 2 weeks when we conduct the governorship election in Ekiti State. And it's the commitment of the commission never to reward bad behavior again. If you deliberately attack our officials in order to disrupt the process, then you cannot benefit from your bad behavior. The commission's position is very clear. I'm sure you followed what happened in Ekiti East compared to what happened in the previous election you mentioned. We are always learning from experience, and we are always using the past experience to improve on the process. Then finally, CGID, campaign finance, release of reports. Actually, we have been doing so. The law says that we should publish in a number of dailies and submit the report to the National Assembly. But we haven't audited the finances of the parties since 2018. Reason 2018 was election year. We're preparing for the 2019 general election. So immediately after the general election, we now audited. We now said we are going to audit the accounts. Then COVID set in. But we have engaged the firms to audit those accounts. So very soon we'll publish those reports. So many people have actually requested for these two things. You have party finance and you have individual candidate expenditure, and they are all related. And for the party finance, there is a part of it that requires the political parties to submit their accounts to the commission 6 months after general election. So whatever the outcome is, we will share it with Nigerians as provided by law. I think I have answered. Is there anyone? Okay, no, Ario. Will it be biometrics in all parts of the country? Is that the question you asked? Yeah, it will be, because perhaps I should say this at this point. When we were using the smart card reader, the voters register was actually not in the card reader. The card reader has a SAM card, and it has a handshake with a chip in the PVC to bring out the data. So the data is actually in the card. But with the beavers, the register is actually in the system. And that's why there are a number of ways by which you can call up the data. You can use the QR code, which is also on the register of voters. You can use the voter identification number, the VIN number on the back of the PVC. You can use the surname of the voter, and you can also use the voter identification number, which is also on the card. For that reason, the Commission has officially abolished the use of the incident form. It's either your biometrics or your facial. What happens when both fail? The voter will be politely advised to go home. I know that some people have been saying that, how can that be? Is the voter not being disenfranchised on account of failure of technology? No, that is what the law says we should do. The law now says that we should use the smart card reader or any other technological device to accredit, authenticate, and confirm, to the exclusion of any other means. And that is what we have provided in these regulations and guidelines that we published yesterday to govern the conduct of all future elections, not just the general election 2023. So now the machine will be used for accreditation. I was so impressed by the performance of the beavers, arising from the glitches we experienced in Anambra and the FCT, and the good performance of the beavers in 4 by-elections around the country on the 26th of February. I'm so happy with the performance of the beavers in the mock we conducted in Ekiti. We choose specific polling units in specific local government areas, and I visited about 7 LGAs early this week in Ekiti State. And for 3 LGAs, I think Ado, Ikole, and Irepodun, Ifelodun, I was there personally in Ekiti. And the performance of the beavers was really fantastic. And interestingly, many of the voters were accredited during the mock using the facial, including an 85-year-old woman who thanked us because she thought she had voted. We said, no, it was a mock. You know. So we are really impressed by the performance of the beavers. Now, what we are going to do for the next 2 weeks is to intensify training so that the beavers will perform as optimally on election day as it performed during the mock exercise. And going forward before the 2023 general elections, we'll also do the mock around the country, not just in a particular part of the country where we have elections. We'll still do the mock in Osun State before the Osun governorship election. So there is no way anybody can be accredited outside what the law provides, which is using the beavers, which is mandatory. Then all the PVCs did not work. I have heard this said that some places all PVCs worked, those who had all PVCs, or all PVC didn't work. The delay. Okay, all PVCs using what? The biometric or that they performed faster? Okay. So what I think we need to do, I didn't see that from the report that ICT gave us. We do a review always. And remember, this machine is designed by INEC. Our engineers actually worked hard to produce this new technology, from the portals to the beavers. Yes, we fabricated it outside the country, but the design of the machine is done in-house by engineers. So we learn from these experiences and begin to tweak. So where that is the case, based on the data available, we'll tweak and make sure that the machines perform optimally. But since then, we haven't had this complaint at all. Then finally, you talked about the administration of the polling units on election day to bring the voting cubicles closer to the ballot boxes. You know, we have been saying so long before the 2019 general elections that we have done so. We noticed that some of the vote buyers hide in one corner and take the opportunity between the time the voter casts his ballot in the cubicle and the time the voter drops the ballot paper into the ballot box. And so we brought the ballot boxes closer to the voting cubicles so that that opportunity does not exist. And I think before after the Ekiti governorship election, we saw another trend before the Oshun governorship election in 2018, where some guys will carry their smartphones into the cubicles. So they will thumbprint, take a snapshot of the ballot paper, and then come and drop their ballot papers naturally into the ballot boxes, and later meet the vote buyers to show evidence that they have been of good behavior in court. Then we banned photographic devices and smartphones in the voting cubicles. And interestingly, it's not only in Nigeria that this happens. In the United States, I observed an election where there is also bold notice that cameras and smartphones not allowed into the voting cubicles. So it's a global thing. But part of the challenge we have with the administration of the polling units is the structures, because they are essentially not INEC structures. And in some places, we don't even have buildings. We have canopies, we call them open spaces. But I've taken note of what you have said. It's something that we are working on. Essentially, what you are talking about is the administration of the polling units on election day to make it even more difficult for people to show their preferences before they drop the ballot papers into the ballot box. I think I've answered all the questions. Thank you.